Catarina attended the annual charity gala out of loyalty more than enthusiasm. Every year, the event brought together donors, academics, politicians, and wealthy benefactors, all gathered beneath crystal chandeliers to congratulate themselves on their generosity. This year, she had agreed to represent the university's astrobiology scholarship program as a favor to a close friend. The scholarships funded promising young researchers who otherwise would never have the opportunity to pursue their work, and that was a cause she genuinely believed in. Unfortunately, supporting the cause meant enduring an evening filled with small talk, forced smiles, and endless networking. She hated events like this. Given the choice, she would have spent the evening exactly where she belonged, alone in her study, wrapped in silence, a mug of tea growing cold beside her telescope. There was comfort in the stars. Their distance didn't bother her. If anything, it fascinated her. At 50 years old, she knew she would never stand on another planet or see those distant systems with her own eyes. But she could study them, understand them, and dream about them. The universe made sense in ways people rarely did. Galas, on the other hand, felt like elaborate exercises in pretense. The plan had been simple. Arrive, speak to a handful of potential donors, deliver her carefully prepared pitch about the scholarship program, smile politely, leave. An hour, perhaps 90 minutes at most. She had already mapped out the fastest route through the ballroom and identified several people she needed to speak with. Efficient, professional, painless. Or at least as painless as these things ever were. Then she spotted Massimo Pancetti. The name alone carried enough weight to make people straighten their posture. He had arrived with his daughter, Gabriella Pancetti, one of the university's most promising students. Catarina had heard nothing but praise about the young woman, brilliant, ambitious, frighteningly intelligent. Several professors had already predicted that Gabriella would accomplish remarkable things before she was 30. Catarina could see why. The young woman moved through conversations with confidence and curiosity, collecting admirers without seeming to notice. Her father, however, was a far more unexpected distraction. Massimo wasn't young, but that somehow made him more attractive. There was a confidence about him that came from experience rather than ego, the kind of presence that couldn't be manufactured. Catarina guessed Gabriella was probably the youngest of several children. He carried himself like a man who had spent decades managing family, business, and responsibilities far larger than himself. At that moment, he looked as though he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. Their eyes met across the crowded ballroom, and she immediately recognized the same trapped expression she was probably wearing herself. Moments later, he crossed the room, appeared beside her with a glass of champagne in hand, and offered it to her. "Trying to find the exits?" he asked quietly. Catarina accepted the glass and smiled despite herself. "There are 7, she replied, glancing around the room. "And unfortunately, I'm not standing close enough to any of them." Massimo laughed, not the polite social chuckle people deployed at charity events, to appear charming, an actual laugh, deep, genuine, and completely unexpected. Several nearby guests turned to look, clearly startled by the sound. Catarina blinked at him in surprise before finding herself smiling. It was infectious. 7 exits, he asked. "You've counted them?" "Within the first 10 minutes. "You prepared an escape route?" "I prepared 7. Massimo shook his head, still grinning. "I knew I liked you." He held out his hand. Massimo Pancetti. Catarina tilted her head as she accepted it. His grip was warm and firm, the hand of someone who worked despite the expensive suit. Catarina Moretti. His eyes brightened. The Catarina Moretti, astrobiology. She groaned. "Please don't say it like that. It makes me sound like a species someone discovered." "Too late, rare, elusive. frequently found hiding from crowds. He gave a cheeky grin. Extremely difficult to observe in natural habitats, known to flee charity galas at alarming speeds. You're learning quickly. They spent the next half hour talking far longer than either of them had intended. The scholarship program came first, naturally. Catarina explained the research opportunities it provided and the importance of supporting students entering emerging scientific fields. The conversation drifted to Gabriella, and Massimo's entire expression softened when speaking about his daughter. She talks about biotechnology the way other students talk about reality television, he said. That sounds promising. Last Christmas, she spent 45 minutes explaining gene editing to her grandmother. How did that go? My mother now believes tomatoes are plotting something. Catarina laughed so hard she nearly spilled her champagne. She sounds remarkable, she admitted. Proud father warning, Massimo said. I could talk about her for hours. I could listen for at least 30 minutes before demanding charts and supporting evidence. You academics are ruthless. What surprised Catarina most was how easily the conversation flowed. Astrobiology and biotechnology weren't identical fields, but there was enough overlap to keep them endlessly entertained. Ideas bounced between them. His knowledge wasn't extensive nor academic, really, but he knew enough information for a father who fully supports his daughter in her chosen field. Questions became debates. Debates became jokes. Before she realized it, nearly an hour had passed. At some point, Massimo glanced at his watch and frowned dramatically. This is unfortunate. What is? I was planning to spend tonight pretending to enjoy myself. And now I'm actually enjoying myself. It ruins the entire strategy. Catarina rolled her eyes. Tragic? I know, I'll need weeks to recover. His smile lingered for a moment before he cleared his throat. I was wondering, he began carefully, would you be interested in continuing this conversation tomorrow? Coffee, somewhere quieter. We could discuss the scholarship programs. One eyebrow rose immediately. The scholarship programs. Absolutely. The scholarship programs that somehow require coffee. Extensive discussion, of course. And perhaps pastries. Critical research. Naturally. She laughed again, finding herself unable to say no. All right, coffee. His smile was entirely too pleased with himself. Without Catarina noticing, they had gradually drifted across the ballroom. Not directly, not obviously. Their conversation had wandered in circles, stopping here and there, as guests interrupted them. Yet somehow they eventually arrived beside the main entrance. Catarina glanced at the doors and narrowed her eyes. You maneuvered me. Massimo looked innocent. I have no idea what you're talking about. You escorted me to an exit. I listened when you expressed your needs. I was being strategically evacuated. You looked distressed. I was mildly inconvenienced. Same thing. She shook her head, laughing despite herself. You're impossible. So I've been told. Outside, the cool evening air was a welcome relief. Her friend Claire was already waiting beside the car, one hand resting on the roof as she checked her phone. Catarina turned to say goodbye, expecting a simple handshake. Instead, Massimo leaned down and brushed a kiss against her cheek. Close enough for only her to hear, he murmured, Tomorrow I'll make sure you're seated near at least 3 exits. The unexpected comment caught her completely off guard. A burst of laughter escaped before she could stop it. Good night, Massimo. Good night, Catarina. Still smiling, she walked toward the car. Claire immediately looked over her shoulder toward the tall, silver-haired man standing beneath the lights of the venue. Well, Claire said, "Who's the silver fox?" Catarina laughed even harder. "Oh, absolutely not." That wasn't an answer. It wasn't a question. It was definitely a question. Behind them, Massimo had clearly heard every word. Catarina glanced back just in time to catch him shaking his head with amusement. Worse, he couldn't seem to take his eyes off her. Standing a few feet away, Gabriella Pancetti noticed too. "Oh, this is incredible," she muttered. "What?" one of her friends asked. Gabby watched her father staring after Catarina with open fascination and practically vibrated with delight. "My father just met a woman who can out-nerd him. And if this works out, family dinners are about to become significantly more entertaining." The entire drive home was spent being interrogated by Claire. Not questioned, interrogated. Claire drove with one hand on the steering wheel and the other occasionally pointing accusingly at Catarina, as though presenting evidence before a jury. "You like him." "I met him for an hour." "You laughed." "I laugh." "Not like that." Catarina sighed dramatically and stared out the window. "You're exhausting." Deflection, classic. "I am not deflecting." "You absolutely are. I watched you spend an hour talking to a man and forget to look for exits." That made Catarina pause. Unfortunately, Claire noticed. "Aha." "Stop saying aha." "Aha." By the time they reached Catarina's house, Claire had somehow managed to turn a simple coffee invitation into a full-scale investigation. Catarina made tea while Claire followed her around the kitchen like an overly enthusiastic detective. "It's coffee," Catarina said for perhaps the 10th time. "Coffee can be a date. Coffee can also be coffee. He kissed your cheek. He's Italian. He flirted with you. He's charming. He arranged an entire ballroom evacuation so you could escape comfortably." Catarina stopped opening a cupboard and looked over her shoulder. "That was admittedly thoughtful." Claire pointed triumphantly. "There it is." "There what is?" "The smile." "I am not smiling." "You are." "I am not." "You've been smiling since the silver fox gave you his number." Catarina threw a tea towel at her. The truth was, she genuinely didn't know how she felt. 5 years had passed since Michael died. 5 years. The number sounded enormous when she said it aloud, yet somehow impossibly small at the same time. She had dated since then. Friends had encouraged it. Family had encouraged it. She had even convinced herself a few times that she wanted to. There had been dinners and movies and awkward conversations with perfectly pleasant men, men who were kind, men who were successful, men who checked all the boxes people insisted mattered. None of them had made her feel anything. She had smiled when expected, laughed when appropriate, answered texts, accepted invitations, all while feeling as though she were performing a role she no longer understood. Like she was going through the motions of dating rather than actually experiencing it. The problem wasn't the men. The problem was that every interaction felt exhausting. At some point, Claire's teasing faded and she sat quietly across from her. "You still miss him?" Catarina looked down at her tea. "Every day." Claire's expression softened. Michael had been one of those rare people who made life easier simply by existing. He'd never demanded she be someone else, never expected her to be more social, more polished, or more interested in things she didn't care about. He'd happily spent evenings sitting beside her while she stared through a telescope for hours. Sometimes he'd even dragged a chair outside and sat beside her, not because he cared about stars, because he cared about her. "He wouldn't want you alone forever," Claire said gently. "I know." And she did know. Michael would probably be horrified by the idea of her spending the next 30 years hiding in her study with nothing but research papers and telescopes for company. He'd probably tell her she was being ridiculous. Then he'd steal her reading glasses until she agreed to leave the house. The memory made her smile. "I know he wouldn't want that," she admitted quietly. But I don't have the energy for complicated anymore." That was the part people rarely understood. It wasn't fear, it wasn't loyalty to Michael, it was fatigue. At 50 years old, Catarina wasn't interested in fixing someone. She didn't want drama, she didn't want games, she didn't want to decipher mixed signals or spend weeks wondering where she stood. Life was too short. Love should make life easier, not harder. A relationship should feel like coming home, not taking on a second job. "I think that's reasonable," Claire said. "I am reasonable. You own 3 telescopes that pretty much do the same thing. That is unrelated. You once missed a dinner party because Mars was visible. Again, unrelated." Claire laughed. "My point is that you're actually very easygoing." Catarina considered that. She thought she was. She liked quiet dinners, good conversation, books, science documentaries, long walks, the occasional road trip. She wasn't high maintenance, she wasn't demanding. She simply wanted someone she could enjoy being around, someone who didn't drain her, someone who made ordinary moments feel better, someone who felt easy. Claire studied her for a moment before smiling knowingly. Oh no. So if this coffee with Massimo is just coffee. It is just coffee. Then you have absolutely nothing to worry about. Correct. And if it's not just coffee? Catarina rolled her eyes. Claire grinned. Then maybe, for the first time in 5 years, you're actually looking forward to seeing someone again. The irritating thing was that Catarina couldn't immediately argue with her. The coffee had been exceptional. Not because of the coffee itself, although it had been very good, but because Massimo had arrived wearing that infuriatingly handsome smile and immediately winked at her before sitting down. "Before you accuse me of false advertising," he said, opening a folder. "Scholarship programs." Catarina laughed. "You actually brought paperwork. You questioned my integrity. I questioned your motives. That's much worse." For the first 30 minutes, they discussed funding opportunities, student research grants, and Gabriella's latest academic achievements. Then somehow the conversation wandered into travel, books, family, embarrassing childhood stories, and why neither of them particularly enjoyed large social gatherings. The coffee stretched into lunch. Lunch somehow became dinner, and after that there was another coffee, then another dinner, then a museum exhibit, then an astronomy lecture Massimo claimed sounded interesting, and spent most of the evening watching Catarina instead of the presentation. Months passed in that comfortable, easy rhythm. Neither of them seemed in a hurry. Neither of them played games. There were no exhausting expectations, just conversation, laughter, and an increasing reluctance to say goodbye at the end of every evening. It was the easiest relationship Catarina had ever experienced. One evening, several months later, Massimo invited her to his home. The property was beautiful without being ostentatious, which somehow suited him. Large windows overlooked immaculate gardens and the city lights beyond. Catarina had expected to meet Gabriella, but the house was unusually quiet. "No Gabriella?" she asked as they walked through the kitchen. Massimo shook his head. "She lives in one of my other houses, closer to the university." Catarina stopped walking. "You have a house specifically for university convenience?" Massimo looked confused. "Yes." "Massimo, normal people buy their children bicycles." He laughed. "I bought her a bicycle. To ride around her private estate. I am beginning to feel judged." "You should." Dinner was halfway finished when Massimo grew more serious. The change was subtle but noticeable. He set down his wine glass and looked at her carefully. "There are some things we need to talk about." "That sounds ominous." "It isn't. That's exactly what people say before something ominous." A reluctant smile tugged at his mouth. "Catarina." She waited. "You know who I am." It wasn't really a question. For a moment she simply studied him. The powerful businessman, the man with multiple homes, the man who always seemed to know things before everyone else, the man whose surname occasionally caused entire rooms to go silent. She sighed. "Massimo, I'm 50 years old." His eyebrow lifted. And I'm Italian." His other eyebrow joined the first. And I've lived in this city for decades." Realization dawned. Massimo leaned back in his chair. "You know." "I know enough." "You're remarkably calm about it." She shrugged. "As long as your professional life remains as separate from me as humanly possible, I don't particularly care." Massimo stared. "That's your reaction." "What were you expecting?" "I don't know. Panic, questions, dramatic declarations." "You watch too many movies." "I don't watch movies." "That explains a lot." The tension evaporated instantly. Later that evening they moved into the living room, each nursing a glass of wine as the conversation turned more personal. She found herself telling him about her grandfather, the old cabin, the endless forests, the summers she'd spent there as a child. "He lived completely off the grid," she explained. Massimo frowned. "How off the grid?" "He made his own furniture. Reasonably eccentric. He hunted his own food. Still acceptable. He once disappeared for 6 months because he didn't want to pay taxes." Massimo blinked. "Now we're entering criminal territory." "He claimed taxes were a social construct." "He sounds insane." "He was." She smiled fondly. "But he was my insane grandfather." She told him she still owned the cabin, that she occasionally disappeared there when the world became too loud, when she needed silence, when she needed to think. Massimo understood that better than most people ever could. Then, inevitably, the conversation turned to Michael. It always did eventually. Massimo had known about her husband long before they'd started dating. People talked. 20 years of marriage left a mark. "We couldn't have children," Catarina said quietly. Michael couldn't. Massimo remained silent, allowing her the space to continue. "We talked about other options." She smiled softly. "But eventually we realized we were happy, exactly as we were. Just the two of them, partners, best friends, a team." He made every ordinary day feel important. The words came easily now. The grief wasn't gone. She suspected it never would be, but it no longer felt sharp, just present, a scar instead of a wound. "When he died," she continued quietly, "I thought I would stop too." Massimo reached over and took her hand. "But you didn't." "No." She squeezed his fingers. "I kept going." For several moments, neither spoke. Then Massimo began talking about his own family, his eldest son, Dante. "The responsible one." "So not you." "Definitely not me." "His second son, Matteo." "The troublemaker." "So exactly you." "Unfortunately." Then Gabriella. His smile softened immediately. "My youngest. She's brilliant." The pride in his voice was unmistakable. "But the world confuses her." Catarina understood immediately. Different wiring. "Exactly." He exhaled slowly. "People spend so much time trying to fix her when nothing is actually broken." That statement alone told Catarina everything she needed to know about the kind of father he was. She smiled. "I'd like to meet her someday." "I think you'd like each other." "I suspect so." There was one final question lingering between them. Catarina hesitated before asking it. And their mother? For the first time that evening, Massimo's expression became unreadable. The warmth remained, but something older appeared beneath it, something heavier. "She's gone." The words were simple, final. Catarina didn't push, didn't ask how, didn't ask why. She simply nodded. Massimo's hand tightened around hers, and somehow that told her far more than any explanation ever could. After several months of dating Massimo, Catarina found herself being slowly and very deliberately absorbed into the Pancetti family, not thrown in all at once, were introduced in stages like someone easing a nervous rescue cat into a house full of large dogs. First came Gabriella, who immediately decided Catarina was fascinating and spent 3 hours discussing biotechnology, astrobiology, and whether humanity would accidentally destroy itself before reaching another star system. Then came Matteo. Matteo's introduction consisted of him walking into a room, looking at her, looking at Massimo, and saying, "Oh, she's real." "I beg your pardon?" Catarina had replied. "I thought Dad made you up." Massimo had nearly choked on his coffee. Eventually there were family dinners, birthday celebrations, and the occasional Sunday lunch where everyone talked over everyone else and somehow still understood the conversation. For the first time in years, Catarina found herself becoming attached, which was exactly why finding the AirTag made her furious. She'd discovered it completely by accident. One Thursday afternoon, her phone had alerted her that an unknown device was moving with her. At first, she'd assumed it belonged to someone parked nearby. Then it followed her to the university, then to the grocery store, then home, then to her grandfather's cabin. That had been the final straw. 3 hours later, she was standing inside one of the Pancetti offices, holding the tiny tracking device between 2 fingers like it was a dead insect. Dante Pancetti sat behind his desk, completely unbothered, which immediately told her everything she needed to know. "You!" she said with barely controlled anger. Dante looked up from his paperwork. "Good afternoon, Catarina." She slammed the AirTag onto his desk. "It was until 5 minutes ago." Dante glanced at it, then at her, then back at it. "Oh, she repeated. "That isn't the reaction of an innocent man." He sighed. "Technically speaking, I never claimed innocence." The floodgates opened. Catarina launched into Italian so quickly Dante barely had time to sit back in his chair. Years of frustration, months of accumulated observations, every irritation she'd ever experienced, all delivered at approximately 1,000 words per minute. "You put a tracker in my car?" Dante wisely remained silent. "Do you have any idea how completely insane that is?" Still silent. "I am a 50-year-old astrophysicist, not a missing shipment." Silence. "I know where I am at all times." Silence. "I literally study celestial navigation." Silence. "If I disappear, look up. I'll probably be staring at a meteor shower somewhere." Across the room, one of Dante's security staff quietly exited before becoming collateral damage. Then she switched to English. Somehow it was worse. "Are all of you like this?" Dante rubbed his jaw. "Like what?" "Criminally overprotective." "We prefer proactive." "You put a tracker in my vehicle." "You found it." "That is not the point." "It actually proves the system works." Catarina stared at him. Dante stared back. Somewhere in the building, someone laughed before immediately stopping. She pointed at him. "You are impossible." "I hear that often." "Your father is impossible too." "Definitely inherited it." "Do you people come with warning labels?" "Usually." I am considering legal action. You've threatened that 3 times. I am a lawyer's friend. I'll try to sleep tonight. By now, Dante wasn't even pretending to work. He was leaning back in his chair with his arms crossed, openly amused, which somehow made her even angrier. Finally, she ran out of steam, mostly because she'd exhausted both languages. Dante studied her for a long moment, then smiled, not mockingly, almost approvingly. "You have fire." Catarina narrowed her eyes. "Excuse me? You have fire." He nodded as though confirming a theory. "You're going to need that." Immediately suspicious, she folded her arms. "Why?" Dante's smile widened. "Because you belong to him." The statement hit her like a brick. "What?" "You belong to him." He said it again, like it explained absolutely everything. Like those 4 words somehow justified tracking devices, overprotective sons, and whatever other nonsense this family considered normal. Catarina stared. Dante stared back, completely serious. "That is the stupidest thing I've heard all year." It wasn't a question. "I am not furniture." "No." "I am not a family pet." "No." "I am certainly not a possession." "No." "Then stop saying I belong to him." Dante considered that fair. A beat passed. "You're still going to need the fire, though." "You're unbelievable." "So I've been told." Without another word, she snatched the AirTag from his desk, shoved it into her handbag, turned sharply on her heel, and stormed from the office. The door slammed behind her. Several employees immediately looked away from the direction she'd gone. Inside the office, Dante sat quietly for a moment. Then he laughed. His father was absolutely finished, because for the first time in years, someone had marched into a Pancetti office, verbally dismantled him in 2 languages, threatened legal action, called the entire family insane. And Dante liked her even more afterwards. The debate began over dinner, or rather, it began as a murder proposal. Catarina had quickly learned that Pancetti family dinners were unlike any normal family gathering she'd ever attended. Most families discussed weather, work, or vacation plans. The Pancettis apparently opened with felony suggestions. "I just want you to shoot him." Gabriella said it while reaching for the breadbasket, as casually as if she'd asked someone to pass the salt. Massimo didn't even look up from his plate. "I'm sure he'll notice." "1 teeny tiny bullet." "No." "Just a little one." "Still no." "His leg?" "No." "A foot?" "No." Gabriella sighed dramatically. "You're no fun anymore." Age does that to a man. Being responsible has ruined you. At that point, Catarina set down her wine glass. "Who exactly are we shooting?" Gabriella immediately pointed across the table. "My professor." "Ah," Massimo nodded. "There it is." "He marked down my assessment." Catarina leaned back in her chair. "And his continued existence is now questionable." "Exactly." "You know," Matteo said thoughtfully, "I appreciate how quickly she escalated." "Don't encourage her," Massimo said quietly, but the steel was there. Matteo sat back. Gabriella ignored all of them. He said my argument was baseless and that my theory was amateurish. Now Catarina was interested. What was the paper about? The projected life expectancy of cellular formations developing within divergent atmospheric environments. The table fell silent. Even Matteo blinked. Massimo pointed at Gabriella. "See, this is why normal people don't understand our dinner conversations." Catarina nodded thoughtfully. "Weren't you specifically examining adaptive cellular evolution within unstable atmospheric chemistry?" Gabriella immediately sat up straighter. Yes. And using theoretical models rather than observational data? Yes. Catarina frowned. It's theoretical astrophysics. Exactly. There are no baselines. Exactly. Gabriella pointed at her like she'd discovered a long-lost ally. Massimo looked between them. I understood none of that. I understood 3 words, Matteo admitted. I heard atmosphere, Dante added. That's because you're all disappointments, Gabriella informed her brothers. What do I do? Gabriella asked Catarina. He completely dismissed it. Catarina thought for several moments, then shrugged. Post it online. Gabriella froze. What? Post it online. Massimo looked interested. Matteo looked terrified. Dante looked amused. Put it up for peer review. Let people in the field read it. Gabriella stared. That's your solution? Science is not democracy. What does that mean? It means your professor isn't the final authority on anything. Catarina took a sip of wine. If your argument has merit, other people will tell you. And if they don't? Then you learn something. Gabriella considered that. Slowly she nodded. Okay. Then her eyes lit up. The look immediately worried everyone at the table. I have another paper. Massimo groaned. Of course you do. I argued against several theories published by Rune Carter. Catarina nearly choked on her wine. The famous Rune Carter was considered one of the most influential astrophysicists of the modern era. Arguing against her work as an undergraduate was either incredibly brave or catastrophically stupid, possibly both. What happened? Catarina asked carefully. My professor said I didn't understand Carter's concepts. Gabriella rolled her eyes. He said arguing against her principles was insulting. The table collectively winced. That's not how science works, Catarina said. I know. Scientific theories are supposed to be challenged. I know. Otherwise, we'd still think the Earth was the center of the universe. Thank you. Gabriella pointed aggressively at everyone. Finally, someone with common sense. Massimo rubbed his temples. God help the university. Catarina smiled. Same advice. Post it online. Gabriella frowned. Again? Again. Why? Because you'll have a better chance of getting a review board to take your concerns seriously if respected peers in your field engage with your arguments. Gabriella immediately grabbed her phone. I'm doing it tonight. Massimo sighed. I miss when children played sports. 24 hours later, Catarina sat alone in her apartment, reading both papers. The first was exactly what she'd expected. Bold, creative, a little reckless. Several assumptions stretched far beyond available evidence. A few conclusions needed refinement, but the thinking behind it was impressive. The second paper was even better. Gabriella had dissected portions of Rune Carter's work regarding adaptive biological survivability in extreme atmospheric systems. Some arguments missed the mark. A few assumptions were overly ambitious, yet several criticisms were thoughtful, original, and surprisingly insightful. Most importantly, Gabriella had done something increasingly rare in academia. She had challenged established thinking, not because she wanted attention, because she genuinely believed the science demanded it. Catarina stared at the screen for a long moment. Then she picked up her phone. There were very few people who knew her real identity.
Even fewer who could act on it.
She dialed immediately. The call connected on the second ring. Christopher. His voice became instantly alert. Mrs. Carter. It's Rena. My apologies. I want you to look into one of the professors teaching in our science programs. A pause. Of course. The student's name is Gabriella Pancetti. Another pause. I've just finished reading a paper she posted online challenging my work on adaptive cellular evolution in divergent atmospheric environments. What did you think? Catarina leaned back in her chair. A slow smile appeared. It was brilliant. Christopher sounded surprised. Truly? It isn't perfect. No paper is. Some of her conclusions need refining. But she's thinking. Catarina stared out her apartment window. She's questioning assumptions. That's important. It's everything. Her voice hardened, and I've been informed she was marked down because her professor claimed disagreeing with me was somehow an insult. Silence, long silence. Finally, Christopher spoke. I'll investigate immediately. Good. Anything else? Yes. Her expression darkened. Anyone teaching science who mistakes disagreement for disrespect shouldn't be teaching science. Christopher didn't hesitate. I understand. The call ended. Catarina lowered the phone and released a slow breath. For years, she'd watched universities preach innovation while rewarding conformity. The best scientists weren't the ones who agreed. They were the ones brave enough to challenge everyone. And Gabriella Pancetti, for better or worse, had enough courage to challenge an entire field. That kind of talent deserved protection, even if the girl occasionally tried to solve academic disputes with gunfire. Catarina woke slowly to an empty bed and the faint scent of Massimo's cologne lingering on the sheets beside her. For a moment she simply lay there, staring at the ceiling. It had become strangely normal over the last few months. Waking up in his home, finding one of his shirts draped over a chair, discovering he'd somehow made coffee before leaving, despite getting less sleep than anyone she knew. Earlier that morning, he'd kissed her forehead before leaving. I have to go to the warehouse. She'd barely opened her eyes. There are some things I need to deal with. That had gotten her attention. Legal things? Massimo had laughed. No. Illegal things? Catarina, that wasn't a no. He'd kissed her forehead again. There are bad things I have to do today. She remembered opening one eye. Should I be concerned by how casually you say that? No. That answer concerns me. His smile had softened. I'll be home later. Then he'd left. Now, several hours later, Catarina was showered, dressed, and preparing to make herself useful. She'd been staying at Massimo's house so often lately that half her belongings seemed to exist in a constant state of migration between homes. The solution, she'd decided, was shopping. A second toothbrush, a few changes of clothes, books, tea. The good moisturizer that Massimo kept accidentally stealing despite insisting he wasn't using it. She was grabbing her handbag when she nearly walked straight into Sal. Immediately her mood soured. She had never liked him. Not from the beginning, not even a little. Everyone else in Massimo's life had eventually become easier to understand. Dante was overprotective. Matteo was chaos disguised as a human being. Gabriella was brilliant and occasionally suggested murder as a practical solution to academic disagreements. Sal was different. Something about him always made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. He smiled too little, watched too much, and whenever he looked at her, she felt as though she was being evaluated. Not welcomed, evaluated. She felt there was something profoundly wrong in the dark pools of his eyes, a chilling emptiness that suggested his soul had abandoned him long ago, leaving something hollow in its place. "Morning," he said. Catarina forced a polite smile. "Sal." Neither moved. The silence stretched, uncomfortable. heavy. Then Sal sighed. I suppose someone should tell you. A cold feeling settled immediately in her stomach. Tell me what? His expression shifted into something that looked almost sympathetic. Almost. Massimo lied to you. The words hit harder than they should have, because her first reaction wasn't belief. It was confusion. Massimo didn't lie. He omitted things, avoided things, redirected conversations with alarming skill, but he didn't lie. What are you talking about? He isn't at the warehouse. Sal folded his arms. He visits her. Catarina stared. Visits who? The love of his life. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Sal continued speaking, calm, measured, cruel, like he always does. Her heartbeat quickened. He told you she was gone, didn't he? Catarina said nothing. Technically true. The smile that followed made her stomach turn. She's gone from his life. Not dead. For several seconds, she couldn't think, couldn't speak, couldn't breathe properly. Every conversation she'd ever had with Massimo seemed to replay at once. Their discussions about his past, his ex-wife, the woman he'd simply described as gone. She'd never asked what he'd meant, never clarified, never pushed, because she'd trusted him. Oh, God, she whispered. Sal nodded slowly. Exactly. Fear wasn't the right word for what she felt then. It wasn't jealousy either. It was something far worse. The terrifying realization that there were pieces of the puzzle she didn't understand, that she had built her happiness on assumptions, that she might have been standing on unstable ground without realizing it. He can't marry you. The words came quietly, softly, deliberately. Not while his wife is still alive. Silence. Then another horrible thought occurred to her. Why was Sal telling her this? Why now? Why today? Why when Massimo wasn't home? The answer came instantly, because he wanted Massimo absent. The realization sent a fresh wave of unease through her. Suddenly she became acutely aware of how alone she was. The house felt different, too quiet, too empty. Sal remained standing in front of her, watching, waiting, expecting a reaction, a confrontation, tears, anger, something. Instead, Catarina's mind became startlingly calm. Massimo wasn't a liar. Whatever this was, there was more to it. She knew that with absolute certainty. But she also knew one other thing. She did not feel safe. Not with Sal, not alone, not while questions she couldn't answer were hanging over her head. Without another word, she turned and walked upstairs. Fast, not running, never running. Her grandfather had taught her that. People notice panic. People underestimate calm. Once inside the bedroom, she locked the door and moved quickly. Wallet, cash, all of it. Every loose note, every coin. She emptied them into a small purse. Then she removed her bank cards, her credit cards, anything traceable, anything connected to her. Her phone followed, then her car keys. Years ago, she might have felt ridiculous doing it. Now she felt relieved. The longer she worked, the calmer she became, because fear wasn't new. She'd lost Michael. She'd survived grief. She'd learned how to keep moving when everything hurt. This was just another problem to solve, a mystery to unravel, and she knew exactly where she needed to go. The cabin, her grandfather's cabin, the place hidden deep in the woods where cell service was unreliable and visitors were almost non-existent. The place where she'd always gone when the world became too loud. She slipped the cash purse into her jacket. Left everything else behind. She didn't need it. There was an emergency box at the cabin with everything she needed. Her grandfather had made sure she was prepared for every scenario possible. Then quietly opened the bedroom door. She'd quickly jotted 2 lines onto the back of a receipt, quietly made her way back down the stairs and into Massimo's study. She put the small piece of paper under the small snow globe on the desk that had been a gift from Gabriella when she was small, and slipped back out of the room as quietly as she had entered. Months earlier, she'd accidentally witnessed Gabriella sneaking out to meet a boyfriend. The girl had proudly explained the security blind spots afterward, mostly because she'd been caught anyway. At the time, Catarina had laughed. Now she silently thanked every rebellious impulse Gabriella had ever possessed. 5 minutes later, she was slipping through that same section of the property, untouched by cameras and prying eyes, and Sal. 10 minutes later, she was walking away from the estate. No phone, no vehicle, no electronic trail. Just cash and determination. For the first time all morning, she allowed herself to breathe. Massimo would find her eventually. She knew that. The man could probably locate a missing satellite if sufficiently motivated. But until she understood the truth, until she could sort through the fear and confusion and hurt, there was only one place she wanted to be. The cabin, the woods. The place where her grandfather had taught her that sometimes the safest thing a person could do was disappear. So that's exactly what It took Massimo 5 days to find her. 5 days of searching, 5 days of phone calls that went unanswered. 5 days of Dante threatening half the city. Matteo suggesting increasingly ridiculous theories about where she could be. And Gabriella repeatedly insisting that if everyone had simply listened to her, they would have found Catarina by day 2. By the time Massimo finally arrived at the cabin, he looked less like a man reuniting with the woman he loved, and more like a man preparing to declare war. The front door swung open, he stepped inside, then stopped. Completely. The fire was crackling in the enormous stone hearth. Books were scattered across various surfaces. A kettle whistled softly from the kitchen, and Catarina was sitting in the giant cast-iron bathtub beside the fireplace, surrounded by bubbles. Massimo stared, his expression darkened. It could have been anyone walking through that door. Catarina smiled sweetly and lifted a dripping hand from the bathwater. I saw you coming. Massimo blinked. What? She pointed toward the wall beside the entrance. Monitor. His frown deepened. Slowly, he leaned around the door and discovered 6 ancient security screens mounted to the timber wall. The image quality looked as though it belonged in a museum. Massimo stared at it, then at her, then back at it. Is that from the 1980s? 1990s. Catarina. It's still work. It's older than Matteo. It's also more reliable than Matteo. For the first time since entering the cabin, his mouth twitched. Barely, but she saw it. He closed the door, took a long breath, then walked across the room and lowered himself onto the worn sofa opposite the bath. The silence that followed was heavy, painful. Finally, he spoke. You left me. The words weren't angry. That was what made them hurt. They were tired, wounded. Catarina's smile disappeared. No. His eyes lifted to hers. No? She shook her head. No. Massimo looked around the cabin as though searching for evidence. You disappeared for 5 days. I left a note. A note? On your desk. His expression became increasingly confused. I never saw a note. Well, somebody should probably investigate that. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Catarina sighed. I told you I needed time to think. I told you I felt like you hadn't been honest with me. I told you there was only one place I could sort through all of that. She gestured around the cabin. Here. Massimo rubbed his face. Catarina, everything was gone. Now she frowned. What? Your clothes. What clothes? The clothes in my wardrobe. Her eyes widened. I left those. No. Yes. No. Massimo, I packed nothing. You packed everything. She sat straighter in the bath. Water sloshed over the side. I left with the clothes I was wearing. No. Stop saying that. I didn't take a damn thing. No. Massimo. Tesoro. I took cash. You took everything. I took $83.17. He froze. You know the exact amount? I counted it. Why? Because apparently I'm the sort of woman who flees into the wilderness with a budget. For several seconds, Massimo simply stared at her. Then he dropped his head into his hands. A rough laugh escaped him, one short, exhausted laugh. Oh, God! What? We thought you'd been taken. The humor vanished immediately. Catarina's smile disappeared. Massimo looked up. His eyes were bloodshot. There were dark circles beneath them. For the first time she realized how tired he looked, how frightened. 5 days, Catarina. His voice cracked slightly. 5 days. Her chest tightened. I didn't think... I know. He exhaled slowly. You left your phone. I didn't want to be tracked. You left your car. Same reason. You left your bank cards. I didn't want anyone finding me. Massimo stared at her. And somehow you didn't think that would terrify me. The answer died in her throat. Because he was right. Completely right. The silence stretched between them. Finally Massimo spoke. Just tell me why. The question was quiet, raw. Why did you leave the house? Catarina looked down at the bathwater. The bubbles had mostly disappeared. You lied to me. Massimo frowned. No. You told me you were going to the warehouse. I did go to the warehouse. Sal told me you were visiting your wife. The cabin became very still, dangerously still. Massimo's expression changed instantly. Not guilt, not panic, something colder. Sal said that? Yes. A long pause followed, then another. Finally Massimo spoke. Why would I visit her? Catarina looked up. Because she's your wife. She has a husband. What? 2 children. What? A Labrador. Sorry? Massimo blinked. I assume she still has the Labrador. Catarina stared. The certainty in his voice left no room for doubt. I thought she was dead. The confession emerged as barely a whisper. The anger drained from Massimo's face. Immediately. Gone. His expression softened. Oh, tesoro. When you said she was gone. His smile was sad. I meant gone. That is not helpful. No. That is literally the least helpful description possible. I know. You could have said divorced. It wasn't really a divorce. You could have said separated. It wasn't really that either. She groaned. Massimo sighed. Then he told her everything about the attempt on his wife's life, about the fear, the trauma, the way she'd broken beneath the weight of it all, how he'd offered her a way out, a new identity, a new life, safety, freedom, a future, and she'd taken it. When he finished, neither spoke for a while. Finally, Catarina asked the question she couldn't stop thinking about. The children? Massimo looked away, his face suddenly years older. I couldn't let her take them. The words hung heavily between them. I offered photographs. His voice was quiet. Updates. He swallowed. Anything she wanted. And? She said seeing them would hurt too much. The grief in his eyes surprised her, because this wasn't only her loss, or his ex-wife's loss. Everyone had lost something. Everyone. I don't have children, Catarina said softly. Massimo looked at her. But that doesn't mean I didn't want them. Something shifted in his expression. Shock. Understanding. Sadness. You wanted children. She smiled sadly. So many. Her eyes drifted toward the fire. Michael couldn't have any. Massimo remained silent. He was injured when he was young. She laughed softly. We used to joke that between the two of us we'd somehow been outsmarted by biology. The memory hurt, as it always did. I considered adoption. And him? He didn't. Did you resent him? The answer came instantly. No, she smiled. I loved him. Simple, absolute, true. I had 20 years with my best friend. Her eyes filled despite herself. He was my person. The words were barely audible, and I miss him every day. Massimo didn't interrupt, didn't try to fix it, didn't tell her grief faded, because they both knew it didn't. It simply changed shape. Sometimes I think I'm unfair to you. That finally made him frown. Why? Because I still love him. The confession settled heavily between them. Massimo nodded once. I know. No. She turned to face him completely, water rippling around her. I don't think you do. His eyes met hers. I love Michael because death stopped the story. Silence. It didn't end because we stopped loving each other. Her voice trembled. It ended because he died. A tear slipped down her cheek. And that's unfinished in ways I can't explain. Massimo sat motionless, listening, understanding, finally, after a long pause. I know. She studied him, really studied him, the exhaustion, the fear, the relief, the love. And suddenly, she understood something too. We aren't young. Massimo laughed softly. No, we are definitely not. I have enough knee pain to prove it. He snorted. She smiled. We have decades behind us. Unfortunately, we have grief. She went on. Yes, regrets. Many questionable decisions. Matteo exists. Her smile widened at that. Exactly. For the first time all day, Massimo laughed, a real laugh. And Catarina found herself smiling too. Then she took a deep breath, the biggest risk she'd taken in years. I loved Michael. Massimo became still. I know. It still hurts. I know. But without losing him. Her voice softened. I never would have known what it was like to love you. Everything stopped. The fire, the room, the world. Massimo stared at her. You love me? She shrugged one shoulder, a small smile touching her lips. Yes. The response lasted exactly 1 second. Then Massimo was moving, crossing the room, ignoring the water, ignoring the bath, ignoring absolutely everything except her. He wrapped his arms around her and pulled her into a fierce embrace. Water splashed everywhere, onto the floor, onto the sofa, onto him, onto the firewood. Neither cared. Catarina laughed. Mass! I don't care. The floor. I don't care. The rug. I'll buy another rug. That's my grandfather's rug. Massimo immediately froze. Oh, see? I'll buy your grandfather another rug. He's been dead 20 years. Then I'll buy him flowers. She laughed so hard she nearly cried. And somehow, that felt right. Massimo buried his face against her shoulder, holding her like he was afraid she'd disappear again. I love you. The words were rough, honest, certain. And you're never doing this to me again. She smiled into his hair. I already knew that. No disappearing. Fine. No wilderness retreats. We'll negotiate. Catarina. Massimo. His arms tightened, and despite everything, the grief, the misunderstandings, the years they couldn't get back, They both knew they had found something worth holding onto, something neither of them had expected to find again. A phone buzzed. The sound was so unexpected that Catarina immediately froze. 1 second she was wrapped in Massimo's arms. The next she was staring at him with growing horror. Slowly, very slowly, she pulled back. Did a phone just ring? Massimo's expression shifted into something suspiciously guilty. Maybe? Massimo. It might have. Massimo. His smile became sheepish. From somewhere inside his jacket, he produced a small phone. Catarina stared, then stared harder, then pointed at it. You brought a phone to my cabin? It's a secure, encrypted satellite phone. That is not helping. Only Dante has the number. Again, not helping. Massimo looked genuinely confused by this. Before he could defend himself further, the phone buzzed again. With the resignation of a man accepting his fate, he answered and immediately put it on speaker. Yes, Dante answered instantly. Did you find her? Yes. A pause. Then, did you put her over your knee? Catarina snorted so hard she nearly inhaled bathwater. Excuse me? On the other end of the line, Dante burst out laughing. Massimo closed his eyes. The expression suggested this was not the first time he'd questioned his son's intelligence. Beside him, Catarina folded her arms. Did he just ask if you spanked me? Massimo winked. Later. Her eyes narrowed immediately. Oh, that's dangerous. Before he could react, she stepped away completely, naked, wet, bubbles sticking to her skin in places, and deliberately wiggled her backside at him while walking toward the kitchen. Pure revenge. Massimo watched her go, then closed his eyes again. Dante. Yes? Speak. The amusement vanished instantly. Can't find Sal. The cabin became quiet. Massimo's expression hardened. The house is dark. Catarina paused halfway to the kettle. A thought struck her. Slowly she turned around. Mass? He looked at her. You said all my things were gone? Everything. His answer was immediate. Clothes, toiletries, books, even the ridiculous moon-shaped lamp. She frowned. I love that lamp. It looked like a haunted potato. It's art. It was a potato. She pointed at him. We're not discussing this right now. Then another realization hit. Her eyes widened. Wait! Massimo immediately became alert. What? The AirTag. There was silence. The what? The AirTag Dante hid in my car. Massimo's head slowly turned toward the phone. The look on his face was terrifying. Dante? A pause, then Dante's cautious voice emerged. Before you say anything, she already yelled at me for that. You put a tracker in her car? In my defense. There is no defense. In my defense, Dante repeated bravely. I've had easier conversations after being shot. Massimo pinched the bridge of his nose. I should have let her shoot you. You considered it? Briefly. Catarina smiled. See, he loves me. I do. The response came so quickly that she actually blushed, which immediately annoyed her, because she was 50 years old and should have been beyond blushing. Apparently not. Dante cleared his throat. The AirTag is still active. Massimo frowned. What? It's attached to her bag. Now Catarina understood. The handbag, the one she'd left behind, the one containing her phone, keys, and cards, the one she'd abandoned in Massimo's house. A long silence followed. Then Dante swore, quietly. Oh. Massimo straightened. Dante! I found him. Every trace of humor disappeared. Catarina felt the shift immediately. The room suddenly felt colder, more dangerous. If he's carrying her bag, or if he's stored it, I have the location. Massimo's voice became deadly calm. Speak. A pause, then, Bashkin? The name landed heavily. Massimo didn't move, didn't blink, didn't react, which somehow felt worse. Before anyone could speak again, another voice suddenly exploded through the speaker. Papa! Massimo winced. Catarina smiled. Gabriella. Did you find her? Yes, Bambina. Good. The response was immediate, sharp, authoritative, the exact tone Massimo used on everyone else. You bring her home right now. Massimo blinked. Excuse me. Now. Gabriella. Now. Catarina laughed. Massimo looked offended. She's bullying me. You deserve it. I do not. You lost me for 5 days. Fair. Gabriella continued as though nobody had interrupted. And you better keep her. Massimo sighed. I intend to. Good. Then Gabriella's voice became thoughtful. I expect you to build her an observatory. Catarina froze. A what? An observatory. Massimo rubbed his face. Gabriella. No, I'm serious. Catarina laughed. Do you have any idea how much an observatory costs? Millions. Many millions. Gabriella was silent. Then, well, I think you deserve one. Catarina burst out laughing. That's not how budgets work. Maybe not for normal people. She looked at Massimo. Massimo looked away, suspiciously. Catarina pointed. Absolutely not. How else, Gabriella continued dramatically, are we supposed to destroy Brunk's atmospheric survivability theories? Catarina gasped. Now that's a compelling argument. Thank you. Massimo looked ready to walk directly into the forest and never return. Instead, he sighed heavily. Dante. Yes? Handle Sal. Already started. Good. Then he looked toward the phone. Gabriella. Yes? I'm assigning you a task. The excitement was immediate. Oh, I love tasks. The lemon room. Gabriella waited. The lemon room was one of the largest rooms in the house. What about it? Convert it into a study. A pause, then, for who? Massimo smiled, for the first time since answering the phone. A real smile. My scholar. Catarina felt something warm settle in her chest. No limitations. Silence. Then an ear-piercing squeal erupted through the speaker. You're on! Massimo winced at the tone. I love you both! The line crackled. Bye. Then she was gone. Dante was considerably calmer. She could hear the hardness in his tone. I'll call when Sal is dealt with. Thank you. The line disconnected. Silence returned to the cabin. For several moments, neither spoke. Then Catarina looked at him. You gave her something to focus on. Massimo nodded. We're going to be here for a while. His gaze softened. Just you and me. One eyebrow lifted. Oh? No children. Dangerous. No Dante. Miraculous. No phone calls. I don't believe that. Minimal phone calls. He moved closer, the hard edges he'd carried since arriving finally disappearing. Catarina smiled. I like the sound of that. Massimo wrapped an arm around her waist and pulled her against him. She'd grabbed a towel and wrapped it around her, sometime during his conversation with Dante, his forehead resting against hers. So do I, Tesoro. And for the first time in 5 days, neither of them seemed in any hurry to be anywhere else. Sal was handled. The Russians he had apparently been negotiating with were handled too. Catarina knew exactly 3 details about the entire situation. 1, Sal had betrayed Massimo. 2, Massimo was extremely unhappy about it. They'd been friends for 30 years. 3. Dante had disappeared for several days afterward, looking suspiciously productive. That was all she needed to know, apparently. Whenever conversations drifted too close to the subject, he immediately changed them. How's work? Fine. How's Dante? Fine. How are the Russians? Massimo slowly lowered his coffee cup. Catarina. Yes? You don't want to know. I really don't. Then stop asking. I wasn't asking. You absolutely were. She smiled. Then consider it scientific curiosity. Your scientific curiosity is going to get you in trouble. That's what Michael used to say. Massimo groaned. I miss Michael. You never met Michael. I know, but every story about him ends with him understanding my suffering. That seems unfair. It seems accurate. For the next several weeks, life settled into something that felt remarkably normal, or as normal as life could be when dating Massimo Pancetti. After spending 3 uninterrupted weeks at the cabin, they returned home. Massimo and Dante disappeared periodically for work, sometimes for a day, sometimes for several. Sometimes Catarina would wake to find both men gone and Gabriella already halfway through redesigning another room of the house into something increasingly ridiculous. The promised study had become legendary. What began as a study somehow evolved into a research sanctuary, then an academic command center, then, according to Gabriella, an intellectual fortress. Catarina had walked into the room one afternoon and discovered 3 enormous monitors, custom shelving, a telescope, 2 reading nooks, a coffee station, and a rotating star projector. What is this? Gabriella looked offended. It's your study. It looks like NASA invaded a library. Thank you. That wasn't a compliment. It absolutely was. Yet despite all of it, despite the mansion and the family and the chaos, the happiest moments remained the simplest. Like the afternoon she took Massimo fishing. The river wound through the forest near her grandfather's cabin. The same river she'd visited since childhood. The same river where Michael had spent years pretending to teach her how to fish while actually stealing her bait. She had fully expected Massimo to be hopeless. The expensive suits, the luxury cars, the private security, none of it exactly screamed outdoors man. So imagine her surprise when he calmly sat on the riverbank, picked up a hook and baited it perfectly. She stared. Massimo looked up. What? You know how to do that? Of course I do. You baited the hook. His eyes narrowed. Should I not know how? You own 12 houses. And? You have a wine cellar that rivals collectors with extreme OCD. And? You once bought your daughter a house because she lived too far from university. Massimo considered this. Then he pointed toward the water. My grandfather taught me. Catarina stared a little longer, then laughed. A genuine laugh, because she'd made assumptions, and because for 20 years Michael had tricked her into baiting every hook he'd ever used. I have been manipulated by men my entire life. Massimo looked delighted. What happened? Michael convinced me he was bad at baiting hooks. He wasn't. He was excellent at it. Massimo laughed so hard he nearly dropped the fishing rod. That's brilliant. It is not. It absolutely is. He made me bait hooks for 20 years. Massimo wiped tears from his eyes. That man was a genius. Later, sitting beside the river with the afternoon sun reflecting off the water, the conversation shifted, as it often did. The comfortable silences between them had become one of Catarina's favorite things. No pressure, no expectations, just peace. Yet there was one question that had quietly lived in the back of her mind for months. A question she'd never intended to ask. A question she wasn't entirely sure why she was asking now. Maybe because they were happy. Maybe because she trusted him. Maybe because at 50 years old she'd finally learned not to leave important things unsaid. "Can I ask you something?" Massimo glanced over. Dangerous opening. Serious question. His expression softened. "Okay." Catarina looked out at the river. "If it were possible," she hesitated. "If we could have a child together." Massimo immediately looked confused. She almost laughed. Not because of his reaction, because she suddenly realized how absurd the conversation sounded. "I'm 50. "I know. You are aware of this?" "Last I checked. When this hypothetical child turned 20, I would be 70. Massimo blinked. "Why are we doing math?" "Because this is important math." "It sounds terrible." "It is terrible." She pointed at herself. 70. Then pointed at him. "You'd be ancient." "I object." "Ancient and grumpy." "I am already grumpy." "True." For a moment he simply stared at her. Then understanding dawned. Slowly. "Oh. Oh? You're asking if I want another child?" She nodded. Massimo leaned back against the riverbank. Thoughtful. Quiet. Far quieter than she'd expected. "I have 4 children." "I know. I have grandchildren threatening to appear within the next decade." "You definitely sound old when you say it like that." "I dislike this conversation." She smiled. His gaze settled on her. Steady, certain. "Catarina." The humor vanished from his voice. "Not entirely, just enough. If you told me tomorrow that you were pregnant, I'd be happy." Her breath caught. "But if you're asking whether I need that..." He shook his head. "No." The answer came immediately, without hesitation, without doubt. "I don't need another child." His hand found hers. "I need you." The simplicity of it stole her breath. Massimo squeezed her fingers. "I've already had the privilege of raising children." His smile softened. "Wonderful, difficult, exhausting children." "You forgot terrifying." "That too." He glanced toward the river, then back at her. "What I want now is different." "What?" "You." She laughed softly. "That's terribly romantic." "I know." "Did Gabriella write that for you?" "No." "Dante?" "Definitely not Dante." "Good point." Massimo smiled, then lifted her hand and kissed her knuckles. "If a child happened, we'd figure it out. Even if I was 70 when they graduated. I'd teach them to drive before then. You'd be 80. We'd hire someone." Catarina burst out laughing. Massimo joined her. The sound echoed across the river, warm, comfortable, happy. And as she sat there beside him, she realized something she hadn't expected. The question had never really been about children. It had been about the future, whether they saw one together, whether they were building something permanent. And judging by the way Massimo looked at her, as though she was the most important thing in his world, she already knew the answer. "Just so you know," she said with a wink, "I'm going to be an awesome nonna." Life settled into a rhythm neither of them had expected to find at their age. Massimo gradually handed over most of the family business to Dante, officially making him the head of the Pancetti family. The transition was surprisingly smooth, mostly because Dante had already been doing half the work for years, and the other half because nobody was brave enough to tell him no. Not that Massimo truly retired. Retirement, Catarina quickly discovered, was apparently a fictional concept. Instead of managing an empire every day, he simply redirected his energy elsewhere. Old buildings became his latest obsession. He bought historic properties that sensible people would have condemned and personally oversaw their restoration. "You're rebuilding a 6-story warehouse from 1898. It's a beautiful building. It has raccoons. She smiled at him, loving the light in his eyes. They have rights too. It has 3 roofs. It only needs 1. The foundation is sinking. It has character. Catarina eventually stopped arguing, mostly because she secretly loved watching him come home covered in dust, excitedly explaining support beams and original brickwork. It was ridiculously adorable, and she would never tell him that. Meanwhile, Catarina ran the astrobiology department at a prestigious university remotely, only appearing in person when absolutely necessary. Most meetings could be accomplished through video calls, and most administrative problems could be solved by reminding people she had 3 decades of experience and very little patience. Her greatest professional challenge wasn't university politics. It was Gabriella. The 2 of them argued constantly, not angry arguments, academic arguments, the kind that began over breakfast and somehow continued through dinner. One evening, Gabriella burst into the house, waving a tablet. "I've disproven your position." Catarina looked up from her book. "Which one?" "The one from Tuesday." "It was Thursday." "The debate started Tuesday." Massimo glanced up from the newspaper. "You people keep score." "We have spreadsheets," Gabriella replied. Massimo slowly lowered the paper. "You have what?" "We rank arguments." "You rank arguments?" "There's a point system." Massimo stood up. "I'm going outside." "You don't even know what we're discussing." "I heard the word spreadsheet." The truth was that Catarina loved those debates. Gabriella's mind moved in strange directions, brilliant directions, sometimes frustrating directions. The young woman could leap across 6 intellectual steps without explaining any of them. "That's not logical." "It is. You skipped the entire middle." The middle was obvious. "To who?" Gabriella looked genuinely confused. "Everyone?" "No. Most people." "No. A small but distinguished group?" "Try again." Massimo often sat nearby, listening with the expression of a man trapped in a foreign country without a translator. And somehow he loved every second of it. The observatory became Catarina's sanctuary, her baby observatory, as Massimo called it, despite the fact it was larger than many professional facilities she'd worked in throughout her career. The first time she'd seen it, she had nearly cried. The domed structure sat on a hill overlooking the property, equipped with a state-of-the-art telescope and technology that made her inner scientist embarrassingly emotional. "It's not a baby observatory," Catarina babbled through her tears. Massimo smiled. "It's all yours." "My own baby observatory? I hate you." "No, you don't." Unfortunately, he was right. On clear nights, they would climb the hill together. Massimo would bring coffee, Catarina would point at stars, and for hours they would simply exist together beneath the night sky. She'd spent most of her life studying the universe, yet somehow the best discovery she'd ever made wasn't in the stars. It was him. The wedding happened 6 months later, not because anyone pressured them, not because tradition demanded it, simply because they looked at each other one day and realized waiting seemed unnecessary. "We're too old for dramatic delays." Massimo nodded. "Agreed. We've both done enough waiting." "Agreed. We could be dead in 20 years. Massimo frowned. That escalated quickly. "I'm an astrophysicist. We deal in probabilities." "You are the least romantic woman I've ever met." She smiled. "You still proposed?" "I did." The family, unfortunately, interpreted the engagement as an invitation to lose their collective minds. Dante immediately attempted to organize everything. Matteo immediately attempted to sabotage Dante's organization. Dante has spreadsheets. Of course he does. He has wedding spreadsheets. Catarina looked horrified. There are multiple spreadsheets? There are tabs. Oh, God. Meanwhile, Matteo was determined to make himself useful. The problem was that Matteo's definition of useful and everyone else's definition differed significantly. We should arrive by helicopter. No. Vintage sports cars. No. A horse? No. A helicopter carrying a horse. Dante closed his eyes. I hate you. Excellent. I can work with that. Great. Matteo's tone was sour. Massimo watched the argument unfold over dinner, completely calm, entirely amused, his sons bickering, Gabriella threatening to redesign the seating chart based on intellectual compatibility, Catarina laughing so hard she nearly spilled her wine. For a moment he simply sat back and watched. His family, his future wife, his life. Then Matteo pointed at him. You're smiling. Massimo immediately stopped. I am not. You absolutely are. Dante looked over. Oh, God. What? The old man is happy. Massimo threw a bread roll at him. Dante caught it without looking. Years of practice. Catarina laughed. And sitting there, surrounded by chaos, arguments, love, and entirely too many wedding spreadsheets, she realized something important. Neither of them had expected this. Not after everything life had thrown at them. Not after loss. Not after grief. Not after years spent believing certain chapters were already finished. Yet somehow they'd found each other anyway. Two people who were supposedly too old to be reckless, too experienced to fall this hard, too practical to rush into marriage, and who had decided quite happily to ignore all of that and get married anyway.